So, can you hear me in the back? It's such a funny question, because if you couldn't hear, you wouldn't be able to answer, but I see some nods. Okay. This next portion of the retreat, we're going to do a little bit different kind of meditation, which is labeled contemplative meditation or contemplating. So I want to make clear it's different than calm abiding, but it has a piece of calm abiding in there, okay? So this is an invitation to be more conceptual, which we love because we're very conceptual. And it may even be a little bit easier than calm abiding because we'll have something to think about. So, one of the very foundational practices of this Kagyu lineage is called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. And this is very much related to refuge. As Lama Michael asked the question first thing this morning, taking refuge from what? So these 4 thoughts that turn the mind help us see what we need refuge from or toward. So in short, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind are first, the precious and rare conditions of having a precious human life. Unfortunately, not all human lives can be labeled precious. Of course, it's good to have a human life, but in this sense, the preciousness comes from a huge number of conditions, and it's kind of startling to consider them because if even one of the conditions is not there, then we do not in this life have all the factors to become fully awakened. But everyone here has those. Secondly, and we'll come back, we're going to contemplate each of these with some guidance. The second of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind are impermanence and death. So when we sit calm abiding, it's not so difficult to see, or rather experience impermanence, because thoughts just come, go, come, go, come, go, right? Even you have moments of complete peace. Comes, goes. Every single nanosecond shows us the impermanence. Change, change, change. The third of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind is the truth of karma. Lama Michael has already referred to it. The shortest way to talk about it, which is quite profound, is every thought, every word, every action that we perform has consequences, and often consequences far beyond what we can fathom in the moment. So karma is the teachings of karma are aiming to help us clean up our act, to function within non-harm ethics. Because without that, there's no way to have a calm mind. The fourth of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind is called the faults of samsara. Samsara is simply the suffering mind, a mind which is captured by ignorance of who we are, what reality is, what we're doing. And based on that ignorance, the mind piles on attachment and pursues that which I want. And it pursues aversion. This is what I don't want. And then often, referring back to karma, we act in ways that are harmful because we're striving to get what we want, often at a cost to others that we don't see or we see and don't care about. Or we're striving to push something away rather than just accepting it, and in that pushing away, again, causing harm. Okay, so we're going to do some contemplations on these. So take a nice, relaxed, but firm seat. Be happy that you're here. Lift the mind, because it is joyful to be able to sit with others who, rather than partying hardy, which is okay too, as long as you know what you're doing, but who want to spend time this way, learning about the mind, learning about wisdom, compassion. So first, precious human life. The Buddhist worldview is that we have had endless, beginningless lives. And until we're fully awakened, we'll continue to take endless lives, all under the influence of ignorance, craving, and attachment. The Buddhist path is to end those, that ignorance, craving, and attachment. Somehow, each and every one of us have arrived in this moment in touch with the Dharma, the path that the Buddha discovered. The Buddha didn't make it up. He experienced it and then shared it. That is incredibly precious. If we think of all the beings as best we can, who even right now have some sort of sentient existence, maybe 7.5 billion humans, uncountable animals, birds, insects, fish, etc. We can ponder how many of them from top to bottom have come in contact with these teachings. Yet we have somehow, causes and conditions have risen, which we helped create in past lives. So we are in touch with the teachings of the Buddha, which lead to the end of suffering. Simply sit with that and see what rises in you. Some teachings say that The Dharma is not always taught in every realm. So there have been what are called darker times in the human realm when the Dharma existed, but it was not taught because there were no humans who were willing, ready, able to practice. But you are. You're interested in this. You make effort. Think how precious that is and really rejoice. It is also taught that there are times where there is no awakened one who can show the Dharma. Yet we are in a time where Shakyamuni Buddha appeared, woke up, taught. Those teachings are still fully alive. Contemplate that and the effect on your own self. One way I think about this for myself is what my life was like before I met the Dharma, when I was looking for meaning. And I found some meaning, but it would always seem on some level to betray me. The Dharma never betrays, never falters. Just consider that for yourself. Another part of the preciousness and rarity of these conditions is to have leisure time. It's a Monday, and we're here. So many people cannot take time off, struggle to just find enough food, shelter for their families, and that is their conditions. Somehow we have earned the conditions to have the basics. We need to have healthy bodies, basically healthy bodies, good enough to be here. And especially to have leisure time. So consider how rare that is and rejoice that you and others have this. And send wishes for those who don't have it. that very soon you will be able to create conditions for them to have it. Also, in some way, we've been prodded with enough suffering to have some urgency to practice. Consider that in your own life. If everything had been completely simple and at ease, likely you would not have come to the Dharma. We also live in a country where freedom of religion is still practiced. There are people who are Buddhists who cannot practice because they're in oppressive circumstances. Consider the goodness of that. This contemplation is aiming at rejoicing in these conditions. And it's also aiming at urging us to practice, because the truth is, not one single one of us can guarantee that next life we will meet the Dharma. Therefore, so long as we have these conditions together, it's good to have some wise urgency toward practicing on and off the cushion to benefit others. And the final thought on this first of the four thoughts: how is it that I have arrived in this place with this inclination to practice, with all these circumstances, connecting to an authentic, pure lineage, when so much of the world is surrounded in vast, dark ignorance? And what will I do with this one precious human life. Now let's take a little stretch in place and relax. Whatever you found is fine, even resistance, disbelief, doubt, joy, love. It's all just thoughts. Come back to your breath and relax. The second thought that turns the mind away from worldly samsaric suffering is the truth of impermanence. Everything changes all the time. Only ignorance keeps us from experiencing that in a profound way. So simply contemplate impermanence. What's your experience of it? Even this very moment. That moment's long gone. Can you find anything that is permanent? Search everywhere. Then rest in what you find or do not find. Then call to mind a time recently when you were surprised or even shocked by some change that occurred. A friend leaving, a sudden illness, to the degree, what I'm noticing, to the degree I'm surprised, I don't really experience impermanence. I have thoughts like, that should have never happened. That should have stayed the same. That's the ignorance of impermanence, the ignorance of not understanding impermanence. So just contemplate that in your own mind. And then we take a look at death. Everyone dies. Most of us ignore that truth until it's right in front of us. It's good to contemplate it before then, since it's probably the biggest transition we'll go through, except for our birth. I will die. From the moment of my birth, I've been dying and living. There's some date in the future when my body and consciousness will separate. No one can stop that. If this seems frightening, which is kind of good if it does, it should feel a little scary. Then take refuge in your mind. Go for refuge in that which goes far beyond death. it is also true that not a single one of us knows when that death will occur. As the teachers often say, could be today. That happens to people. They're just driving somewhere and they die in an accident, a heart attack. Something occurs, some karma rises, and body and consciousness separate. Just contemplate that for yourself and rest in whatever rises. When your mind tires of the contemplation, simply drop into shamatha, following the breath, and relax. As we contemplate each of these four thoughts, on a deeper and deeper level, we can experience the need for a refuge. A reliable refuge. So before we do the fourth thought, take a moment and simply bring to mind your teachers, the Buddha, the teachings, those who follow the teachings, and see what rises as you turn to those reliable sources of refuge. In the context of having these precious, rare circumstances, the context of impermanence and death, what does refuge mean to you? How can your own practice become refuge? And then we think about karma. There's so many misconceptions about karma. It simply means action. Action, not predestination. In Buddhism, all times are unbounded. Everything's changing, so obviously there's no predestination. Karma, action. Action of body, action of speech, and particularly action of mind. Mind performs actions. And every single thing we think, say, or do is like a pebble in a very quiet pond. Ripples go out and out and out and out. So just consider that. We create habits. We can create new habits. We've all experienced that. Habits of harm. Even when we wished we weren't. It's a habit. But the mind is trainable. And speech and body actions follow the mind. We can train in habits of non-harm. Consider what that means for your own life and practice. Where do I still give myself a pass? Where do I cut corners about ethics? Gently, with no judgment, just seeing that. Perhaps aspiring to change that. When we fail to be ethical, our lives are chaotic. We create trauma and drama, and then somehow, of course I'm talking about myself here, but somehow I think I can sit and have a calm mind and heart. What I do off the cushion completely affects on the cushion and vice versa. The more we can create simple, peaceful lives off the cushion, the better for our practice, and the more we're able to benefit others. See if that's true for you. And rest all thoughts. Just go back to calm abiding. Let's take a little stretch break in place, wishing ourselves happiness. The fourth thought, the faults of samsara. As I stated before, the turtle at the bottom under all the turtles, all the way to the bottom of all turtles, is ignorance. Both the ignorance of, on the simplest level, what leads to suffering and what leads to the end of suffering. So just consider in your own mind and life whether you understand that yet. What do I do that still leads to suffering? What do I engage in that leads away from suffering? Most of us will find some confusion, and that's fine. It's good to see it. to be kind to ourselves. Based on this ignorance, lost in a sense of separate self quite often, protecting that one, following the endless desires of that hallucinated self. Following the endless aversions of that hallucinated separate self, then we suffer and we cause suffering. Then we bring compassion to that suffering self, wishing ourselves free of this samsaric confusion. And wishing ourselves free so that we can become useful in freeing others. Lama Eric shared a quote in his Calm Abiding Vipassana retreat this last year, a quote by Toku Orgen. It's a good one to contemplate in terms of what the heck is samsara. He says, samsara is mind turned outward, lost in projections. Nirvana is mind turned inward, resting in its nature. Samsara is mind turned outward, lost in projections. Nirvana is mind turned inward, resting in its nature. Now, if it suits you, drop all contemplations. Just engage in calm abiding. When your mind calms, rest in its true nature. Let's dedicate this effort.
By the this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you. We'll have a 15-minute tea break again in silence, and maybe try to notice how impermanent everything is as you move around in silence. It's a little easier to notice each movement, coming, going. Thank you.